Trucker Dump, episode 153. In today's show, we discuss truckers and their taxes in an interview with Mason War, CEO and co-founder of COS Accounting and Tax. Lots of good info on 1099 drivers here, so pay attention. But first, we've got the obligatory COVID-related news, including more extensions and vaccines. We've got the Canadian electronic log rollouts, lawsuits involving Prime Incorporated, sleeper berth pay, and independent contractors. And I'll tell you when to expect the next safety blitz. Of course, the government has been busy too, with pushes for underride guards, speed limiters, mileage-based taxes, and more truck tolls. President Biden wants to fortify the supply chain, while the FMCSA warns truck drivers of massive job losses, all while thousands of drivers are being lost to drug testing. Yeah, that all makes perfect sense. Thankfully, we have listener feedback to cheer us up. We'll hear from Danny, Tehran, Sean, and of course, Stevie. This episode of Trucker Dump is sponsored by Volvo Trucks. You can learn more at volvotrucks.us.
Welcome to Trucker Dump, where you'll get one driver's insights and sometimes humorous views of truck driving and the trucking industry, and pretty much anything else he feels like dumping on you. This podcast is brought to you by abouttruckdriving.com. Resources that help you understand the world of truck driving through the use of stories and a pathetic attempt at humor.
Hey, trucker dumpers. Well, I don't know about you, but I am extremely glad that spring is upon us. It is here. Finally. Well, we hope anyway. Man, that snowpocalypse was a nightmare, wasn't it? Did you have any problems in it? Did you get caught in, sitting for days like a lot of people? Any incidents, accidents on your report? To report or anything like that? Well, I hope not. I did escape all that. I managed to miss most of the snow, so I was happy about that. And the worst of the cold days, which was probably minus 15 here in Missouri, which doesn't happen that often. We actually got called off work that night, which is kind of strange for LTL, but they called us off, which was kind of awesome Monday night. But when they called us off Tuesday night because they couldn't get the truck started, well, then I was like, huh? And then finally we went out Wednesday night. So anyway, I escaped most of it, but a little bit of aftermath. But, when it's snowing like that and it's cold like that, you don't really mind staying on your couch at home. You know what I mean, Vern? One thing I do know about snow is that if you want to avoid it, just find out where driver Chris Mack is and go the opposite direction. I don't know what it is with that guy, but he is always in snow. Always. But, I can't complain. All this backed up freight is just filling my pockets with money. I had my biggest check not too long ago ever with this company, and, well, that makes you real happy. Except for the fact that, Uncle Sam bends you over and takes advantage of you. So anyway, I guess I should perhaps introduce myself to those of you who are new to the show. My name is Todd McCann. I'm a 23-year trucker. I'm a freelance writer when somebody wants to pay me to do it. And I am the author of 2 trucking ebooks. One is called How to Find a Great Truck Driving Job, and the other is Trucking Life. You can check out both of those at abouttruckdriving.com. And you can get 25% off if you order through the website. Oh, and by the way, the Trucking Life ebook also has a free audiobook version. And, well, if you can stand listening to my voice for 9.25 hours, then that's the way to go. Again, all that's 25% off. I believe the price is $14.98. Again, check that out at abouttruckdriving.com. So before we get to the news, let me take a second and just mention a couple of things that I found. These are not advertisers, but just interesting services and, one service and one product that I found. The first is called Stowit. You can find it at stowit.com, stowit.com. This is kind of a neat service and might interest some of you truckers out there. Basically, well, have you ever heard of, what's it called? Airbnb. Yeah, that's it. Airbnb is like it's like a real estate service, kind of like hey, if you've got a house that you aren't using or a room that you're not using and you want to rent it out for vacationers or something like that, then you can just put it online and it connects you with people who are looking for a place to stay. Well, that's kind of what Stow It is doing. So say you've got a barn out back of your house and, you don't have anything in it, and you could put that on Stow It and somebody could actually store their RV there or their boat or something like that. Or maybe you just got a lot of like a field or a pasture or a big parking lot next to a barn or something like that. Or maybe you've got some commercial real estate that's just sitting there doing nothing, and you could use that parking lot, for boats, RVs, or semi-trucks. That's where I was going with that. So that's what this is. You can find places to store your truck. For instance, if you got to go home on the weekend or whatever, and you need a place to store it, you might check out Stow It here. Now, one thing I did notice right now is they are only available in 3 states. What is it? California? No, it's Colorado, Minnesota, and Texas. I assume they'll be expanding out eventually, but right now it's just those 3 states. But, it's a neat idea, I think. So basically, if you have space to rent out for vehicles or something like that, or you need space and you're in Texas, Minnesota, or Colorado, go and check out stowit.com. Again, this is not an advertisement or anything like that. Just found this to be a neat service, and they were reaching out to me about it. It wasn't enough to really do a whole segment on the podcast about it, but, thought it was kind of neat to mention. Next up, there's a cool product I found. I found this one actually on overdriveonline.com. This one actually would have been really helpful during snowpocalypse. This is a product from Truck-Lite. That's Truck-Lite. That's the name of the company. They have released heated stop, turn, and tail lamps. Pretty cool, huh? They're all LEDs, of course, but they have a little heater in them, which would be great, because how many times have you finished a trip when you're driving in the snow and you go to do your post trip? You do your post trip, right? But how many times do you walk around back only to find that your stop lights are completely covered and nobody could even see when you were trying to change lanes or stop or anything like that? So this is just a neat little thing. Again, no affiliate fee or anything like that. Just found these neat. It's the first time I've ever heard of a heated tail light. So go and check those out if you're interested. Just look for these. Truck-Lite is the name of the product. And if I can find a link to these directly to these lights, I will put them in the show notes. For those of you new to the show, show notes will be found in your podcast app. If you're listening in a podcast app, just scroll right, scroll left, scroll up, scroll down. Did I say that right? I think I said skull. Don't do skull. That's bad for you. It'll eat your gums out. No, Anyway, you should be able to find those show notes somewhere in your podcast app. And if you are not listening on a podcast app, you can go to abouttruckdriving.com and search for TD153. That is the number of this episode, and you will find the show notes and all the links that I mention here at the bottom of that blog post. All right, we got a lot of news, so without further ado, let's get on with it. All right. Well, thankfully, to start out, we don't have any recalls to discuss, but we do have, of course, some COVID news. What a surprise. This one I found on truckersreport.com. COVID-19 HOS exemption extended maybe for the last time. Yep. Apparently the first extension happened in March of 2020 when the pandemic was first announced. And since then, they've extended it 4 different times. Now, this is not to do with the licenses and the hazmat and all that stuff. This has to do with the actual hours of service and, being able to run over the hours of service if you are engaged in emergency relief efforts. So again, the things that will qualify you for this exemption, and basically the exemption just says you can drive whatever you want as long as you feel safe. It's just kind of weird. But anyway, that's still going on. The first one is if you're pulling livestock or livestock feed. Second would be medical supplies and equipment related to COVID-19 and the testing of it. The third would be vaccines and medical equipment, for the prevention of COVID-19. The fourth one is supplies for, sanitation, safety, like masks, gloves, hand sanitizer and stuff like that. And the fifth one would be food, paper products, and other groceries, for restocking distribution centers and things like that. Now, they're saying as of now, they're planning on this to be going through May 31st of 2021. And they're saying that's hopefully the last one. But of course, they're leaving themselves an out and saying, it could be later. They also are saying it could be sooner. So if, the government declares the national emergency over before May 31st, this exemption could be over with it. Or I should say exemption. It's actually an exception. No, it is an exemption. Exemption, exception. I know there's a difference. I just don't know what the heck it is. All right. Anyway, if you're interested in more on this, check out the link in the show notes. All right. Sticking with COVID fun, let's hop over to truckinginfo.com. This one is called Trucking Industry Pushes CDC for COVID-19 Vaccines at Truck Stops. Now, there have been some incidents, perhaps you've encountered this. We all know the vaccine's out, right? And as we discussed in the last episode, truckers are, getting ready. They're in the third phase and they're going to be eligible for this vaccine. Well, I honestly haven't figured out if I'm going to take it or not yet, but the evil overlord, that's my wife and ex-co-driver, she was checking into this and found out that really the only time they book appointments in our area is a Thursday. And that is a problem for me, because I'm on the road all week long. And I've read other stories where it's very similar where, for instance, one of those vaccines has 2 shots and they're just basically saying, hey, we're going to give you a couple days advance to come in for your appointment and you got to be there. Well, it's kind of hard to do that if you're 1,500 miles away, right? Well, it's possible, but you'll be illegal doing it. So, and most truckers honestly just can't drop what they're doing and head straight home. So what they're proposing here is there's a lot of trucking industry groups and stuff that are in the OOIDA. They're all calling for, hey, why don't we set up some of these vaccine sites at truck stops? Because it'd be really easy for trucks to get into. And they're also saying that what is really important is that truckers be able to get them in a state other than where they're at. For instance, on this 2-shot thing, you might be going through Indiana and you get the first shot and then within a certain amount of time, you have to take that second shot. Well, what's the chances you're going to be back in Indiana again? Probably not very good. So they're saying, trying to give us, some truckers some leeway on this so we could, get the first one in Indiana and then maybe get the next one in Pennsylvania or Ohio, wherever you're at. Anyway, it's definitely some challenges for truckers here when it comes to this vaccine. And again, I don't know how many are planning on taking it. I'd be interested to know the numbers on that. I haven't heard from anyone of you, whether you're going to be taking it or not. Maybe that's your personal business and I get that. But, hey, if you want to share if you're going to get that vaccine or not, let me know. One thing that would help us, once this, I think the 1-shot version is out now. So that would help. At least we wouldn't have to try to make 2 appointments, which is nigh impossible when you're a trucker. So anyway, for more information on this article, head over to truckinginfo.com by clicking on the link in the show notes. All right, next up, we've got another international road check right around the corner. Wait a second. Didn't we just have one of those in September? Yeah, we did. Last year it got delayed because of COVID, and this year it looks like they're trying to get it back on schedule. So this 72-hour road blitz will be held on May 4th through May 6th. Now, it's going to focus on lighting and hours of service this year. Now, of course, they're always going to do their full inspections and stuff. They say they're mostly going to be given level 1 inspections, which is covers the entire truck and all the driver records. So expect full inspections here. They're going to look at all the normal stuff, brakes, fuel systems, wheels, tires, all that good stuff. But they are going to focus on lighting and hours of service. Now, the article, which, by the way, is on overdriveonline.com, link in the show notes, this says that in 2020, the lighting violations was the number one vehicle violation in the in all of 2020. And that accounted for a little over 12% of all vehicle violations discovered in, last year. That's pretty crazy. And during last year's road check inspection, 35% of all driver out of service violations were due to hours of service. So that's why they're focusing on that part of it. Now, you don't want to be one like last year. They had 15,000 trucks and drivers placed out of service. Don't be one of those. Get your lights checked out, especially you out there with all those chicken lights. You may have a lot more lights than you need, but even if it's not a vital light, it is a service violation if you do not if every single light on your truck isn't working, which is why I don't understand why these chicken haulers do that. They put all those lights on there, and then if one of them goes out, it's a pain in the butt just dealing with the lights that are mandatory, let alone putting extra ones on there. Anyway, for more information on this road check that's coming up May 4th through May 6th, check out overdriveonline.com and be prepared. All right, next up, let's head back over to truckinginfo.com. And we are going to look at the ELD mandate in Canada. Boy, our friends to the north were not prepared for this, apparently. This was supposed to kick in on June 12th, but they are saying that they are going to have a, quote, progressive enforcement period lasting 12 months. So they are not prepared at all for this. And I was wondering, well, what's the big deal? Well, I don't know if you know this, but in the United States, they just, set the mandate date and let the ELD manufacturers just kind of what they called self-certify. So they put the burden, the government put the burden on the ELD manufacturer to say, hey, our devices are legal and follow all the rules that you've set forth and all that stuff. And, then I guess if they got in trouble later on for not doing it, then there would be some repercussions from that. But that is not the way Canada's doing it. Canada, and probably the reason why all of these ELD manufacturers are not ready. And honestly, that's the biggest part of it. Most trucking companies up there are not prepared for this. And mostly it's because the ELDs themselves are not ready. The manufacturers have dragged their feet, and with good reason. The certification process there is not free. The government is watching every step of it, and it's going to cost between $40,000 to $60,000 to get each new device certified. Now, that's not saying, every device in every truck, but every model of ELD that the ELD manufacturer wants to put out, that has to go through $40,000 to $60,000 to get the device certified. But as they say in the infomercials, that's not all. There's more. Yeah. Every year after that, 25% of the ELDs are going to have to be retested, and they're going to have to pay $12,000 to $25,000 per model for that work. So that's an expensive process to go through. Now, a lot of the ELD manufacturers say they will be ready by June 12th, and they will just do a software update to their own to their already existing ELDs. Others have not made any move whatsoever. And they're saying only about 10 to 15% of the ELD suppliers in America are actually going to even try to certify in Canada. So that's going to cut it down even less. The article here says that's going to leave about only 25 to 50 devices potentially certified in the early stages. So have fun with that, Canada. We've already been through this and it wasn't fun. So enjoy yourselves on that. For more information on this, check out truckinginfo.com, link in the show notes. All right, now we've got a couple of articles, again, from truckinginfo.com. Wow, they seem to be taking over as the main source over overdriveonline.com this time. Anyway, this one is about underride legislation. Underride is, it's basically when a car goes underneath a trailer. So, we all have the rear safety bumpers, the DOT bumpers on the back of the trailers now. That's been mandated for quite a while. Well, this legislation is calling out for side and front guards also. So, and that's for tractor trailers and even straight trucks. So apparently this was brought up in 2017 and 2019, and it was knocked down both times. But this one is coming up again, as we expected, because like we said, the Democrats like their regulations, and they're going to be bringing it up again. This one is largely being forwarded by Democrats, but there is a Republican in there also. This one is called the Stop Underrides Act, and, they're just trying to make these mandated everywhere. And they say there was more than 6,000 people died from underride accidents between 1994 and 2018. But they do say that this is probably a low estimate because of the different ways that police report accidents and the things that are required. Like they might not even have say that it's an underride accident in the report. It all depends on how the local police do that. So anyway, this just, of course, there's always the problem with this. It'd be nice just to say, hey, yeah, let's do this because it's safer for everyone. But there's always a trade-off in this. You can't just do everything for safety. Sometimes you have to weigh the costs. And that's what the second article is about. It's also on truckinginfo.com. And it's just called Should Truck Trailers Have Side Underride Guards? And, it goes into some of the cost analysis of it and, the weight of these things. Like, for instance, there's one here they mentioned called, it's a company called Angel Wings, and it's a system to, for the side rails of a semi, keep trucks from going or cars from going underneath there. But, it adds like between 450 to 800 pounds. Depending on the configuration that you get. It says it can be installed by 2 people in less than 2 hours, so it's not labor intensive. It's just, it adds weight, it adds cost. They're saying this for a 53-foot semi-trailer kit, it'd be about $2,900 and free shipping. Again, this company is called Angel Wing, if you're interested in looking this up, or just go check out the link here in the show notes. But, as always, like they're saying, they need to weigh that, because when you add 450 to 600 pounds or 450 to 800 pounds onto your truck and your total gross weight, now you can haul less freight. So that's not productive for, these shippers. It's not productive for the economy in general. So you have to weigh that in. Now, they're talking in this article, maybe they'll add an exemption. For instance, when APUs, auxiliary power units started being installed on trucks, they were heavy, big motors, actually, generators. And so, if you had one installed, they would actually give you an exemption where you could carry 400 more pounds. So for instance, if your gross weight was 80,000 pounds, you'd actually be legal hauling 80,400 pounds. So they're thinking, well, maybe they can do that again and just tack on a little extra weight. But, then we're causing wear and tear on our roads. And of course, they go into the cost benefit analysis, and this seems cold and hard, but with all of these things, you've heard stories of like, a car manufacturer saying, well, do we recall this or not? It's causing this wiring issue is causing fires, but does it happen enough to cause enough damage to warrant the cost that's going to, cost to recall the whole thing? And that's just a cold hard fact. This is business. You have to weigh it out. You can't add thousands or millions of dollars to something just because, one person died. You just have to weigh it out. It's the cold, hard truth. And if you think that's just corporations doing that, that's not. It's not. The government has been doing this for years. They have to do it as a way to figure out if it's worth the government's time and effort to try to enforce something like this. So anyway, I just found this to be an interesting article, the second one, about the cost benefit analysis and how that all works. Again, check that out. Link in the show notes if you're interested in that sort of junk. All right, what say we get back to overdriveonline.com? Well, I just mentioned regulations, right? And I mentioned in the last podcast that with the new administration, there would probably be more regulations being looked at. Well, surprise, surprise. Guess what's back up? Speed limiters. Yep. In 2016, they proposed a speed limiter on trucks all across the board for all trucks out on the road to have speed limiters. And Trump knocked that down and said, let's just not pursue this. He put that on the back burner in 2017. Well, it's come back up again. This new proposal is called the Cullum-Owings Large Truck Safe Operating Speed Act. Wow, that's a mouthful. And it is calling for all new commercial trucks to be equipped with speed limiters and to require existing speed limiting technology already installed on trucks manufactured after 1992 to be used in operation. So if the truck is capable of installing any kind of speed limiter on it through software or whatever, they're going to require it. And they're calling for these maximum speeds to be set at 65 or 70 mile an hour if you have certain safety technologies such as adaptive cruise control, automatic emergency braking, stuff like that. And they're also calling in this bill to review the whole thing every 5 years and decide whether 65 and 70 is the right speed limit. Maybe they decide they want to go slower, maybe faster. I doubt faster ever, but you never know. I mean, the national speed limit used to be 55, and now, we got parts of Utah and Texas that have 85 mile an hour speed limits. So we'll see. Of course, it won't matter if they put speed limiters in all trucks. Ugh, boy. Of course, there are lots of people battling against this. The main ones being OIDA, the Owner Operator Independent Drivers Association. They, in a quote, "We are adamantly opposed to any proposals that would create a separate national speed limit for commercial vehicles." This goes back to the whole argument of split speed limits have shown to be not very safe. When one group, for instance, in California, all vehicles pulling a trailer, even like a pickup truck pulling a boat, are required to go 55 mile an hour. Now, they don't often do that, but that's beside the point, and everybody else gets to go 70, and that causes too much variance in speed. Not everybody's going the same speed, and that causes more of a chance for accidents. But I don't know. The government just seems to ignore this fact and say that problem doesn't exist. Another thing OIDA pointed out was that this could cause a weird, kind of a strange effect with the 65 and 70. For instance, you could have a really experienced driver who's driven millions of miles accident free in his own truck, and say it's a 2000 model or something, and it doesn't have all these new fancy safety features. He has to go 65 mile an hour, while somebody straight out of school that goes to one of the larger fleets that can afford to put all this stuff on there, the ones who have newer trucks that have all the safety equipment and stuff like that, they would be able to go 70 mile an hour. They come straight out of school and they can go 70, but an experienced driver with millions of miles under his belt has to go 65. You see the dichotomy there? That's a little weird, and it doesn't really make much sense. But we will see where this goes. Again, they're bringing this up again. Will it ever go away? I doubt it. And of course, I've mentioned this before, but the main reason a lot of these the main supporters behind this are the American Trucking Association. And that is the organization that, represents, all the big carriers out there, JB Hunt and US Express and Snyder and Walmart and all of those. And of course, the whole idea for them, they say it's for safety reasons. I think most of us think that probably the real thought behind that is that if they make all the trucks go the same speed, then they will be on a better, they will have more of a chance of getting drivers away from some of these owner operators. Because, right now, let's be honest, a lot of these owner operators, one of the things they have going for them is they can hire on a driver and say, hey, my trucks go 75 mile an hour. I don't have a problem with you doing 75 as long as the speed limit's 75, but all of these big carriers are limited at 65 or 70 or 68 or 63 or whatever they're mandated at, or not mandated. It's not mandated. It's just a guideline that the trucking companies use. They set the speed. And, that's not attractive to a lot of drivers. They'd rather go drive something that's a bit older, maybe a smaller company. But if all of the trucks are going 65, say, well, usually the big fleets can afford to pay more. So why wouldn't they go over there now? Because they're not getting the advantage of a faster truck, right? So anyway, that's kind of the thought behind this. Is the American Trucking Association would naturally like to see most owner operators go away because that would mean more freight for them. Don't blame them for doing that. They are corporations, and that is what they're supposed to do, is make the most money they can. So they're looking out for themselves, but not necessarily for the trucking industry in general. That is just my opinion, though. You got thoughts on that? Send them in, truckerdump@gmail.com. I would love to hear an animated, not too animated, audio comment of what your thoughts are on speed limiters. Here we go. All right, let's move on. All right. In the last episode, when we spoke about the Department of Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, he's a new guy in office there, and he was talking about, how he wants to rebuild infrastructure, and Biden's got the Build Back Better initiative going on, where he wants to, fix our infrastructure, which pretty much every president in the last billion years has said, but nobody ever does it. So anyway, here's the problem. You need money to fix it, right? Well, kind of shooting ourselves in the foot here because, most of this money comes from fuel taxes. And, well, everybody's saying, hey, let's go to electric cars. It'll be great. Okay, now where do you get the money? Because obviously electric cars don't need gas. And, car makers like Volvo have said that they're not even going to offer a gas option after 2030. Everything's going to be electric. And I can't remember, I think it was GM said they would be completely electric by, was it 2035 maybe? I don't remember. It's not that far off. But anyway, there are no answers to this right now. They've toyed with a vehicle mile tax, but they're afraid that is going to hit rural Americans even harder than, people who live in big cities, because typically big city people, they have a shorter commute. They, or they ride the subway or the train or something like that. And they, their taxes are going to be low. Whereas rural America typically has to drive further. They have a longer commute. They would be paying more for, more of that money towards the infrastructure. So it's a balance that's going to have to be come up with. They've got to figure something out, and they honestly don't know where they're going. According to Pete Buttigieg, he just said recently, he was quoted saying, what we do know is we got to come up with revenue. Okay, well, that's easy to say, but what are they going to do? I guess it's brainstorming time in the Biden administration. Well, good luck with that, guys. Speaking of more problems that are hard to fix, let's go to truckersreport.com. This one's called Biden Orders Fortification of U.S. Supply Chain. Apparently the COVID-19 pandemic did one thing really well. It made aware to the public how important truckers were, right? I mean, there were shortages for, frontline workers, for protective equipment. They were short on supplies everywhere, and of course the public knows all too well because, if you threaten their ability to wipe their butts, they are really concerned all of a sudden. Well, apparently Biden signed an executive order, one of his 800 million he signed so far. It says it launches a comprehensive review of U.S. supply chains and directs federal departments and agencies to identify ways to secure U.S. supply chains against a wide range of risks and vulnerabilities. So this is coming in two parts. The first directs an immediate 100-day review across federal agencies to address vulnerabilities in the supply chains of 4 key products. Those products are APIs. Never heard of that. It says it's the part of the pharmaceutical product that actually contains the active drug. Apparently, about 70% of API production is overseas, and therefore it's potentially vulnerable to disruption outside of U.S. control. Don't know how we're going to fix that if it's outside of U.S. control, right? The second one is critical minerals used for defense and high-tech products. Production. Third is production of semiconductors, because, we all are counting on computers nowadays. Most of those are manufactured overseas also. And the last is large capacity batteries. Again, I don't know who decides what's important in this country and what isn't. I did see that toilet paper wasn't on that list. The second part of the executive order launches, quote, an in-depth 1-year review of a broader set of U.S. supply chains. This is designed to ensure the health and security of America, focusing on 6 key sectors. 1, the defense industrial base. 2, the public health and biological preparedness industrial base. 3, the information and communications technology industrial base. 4, the energy sector industrial base. 5, here we are, the transportation industrial base. And 6, supply chains for agriculture, commodities, and food production. Okay. Again, they do say, these are just like, check it out. He's just saying, hey, go check it out. Let's see what we can do about this stuff. But man, these are going to be hard problems to solve. I mean, how do you control something that's outside of the United States like that? They can do all the studies they want, but finding a solution to something like this is way harder unless our economy goes back to more of a storing stuff long term. Right now we're kind of on a just in time system where, people don't want their stuff until they need it really. They don't order it like months in advance and it's just sitting in their warehouse. Most of the time, that's not the way that works. They want to get that. They don't want that stuff just sitting around in their warehouse. They want to get it when they need it. And, maybe that has to change on certain stuff like this. Maybe we have to keep a good supply of these APIs for pharmaceutical products or critical minerals. You got to stock up more on those in semiconductors, things like that. I don't know what they're going to do, but again, good luck with that, guys. You're in charge now. Oh, boy. All right, this next one comes from a news source that I was not familiar with. It is called transportationnation.com. This one has kind of an alarming headline to it. New FMCSA boss warns of coming truck driver job losses due to driverless trucks. Okay, now this is not the FMCSA director, so to speak. This is the acting administrator, which means Biden has not chosen anybody to head up the FMCSA yet. And until he does, this Mira Joshi, sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, Miss Joshi, she is in charge. She spoke at the FMCSA's annual Analysis, Research, and Technology Forum. And, well, she didn't have good news for truckers. She says that self-driving trucks represent a serious threat to professional truck drivers, and driverless technology is extremely real and will have broad impacts on people's livelihoods. Oh, well, that's just great, isn't it? I mean, we knew this was coming, right? But, well, She goes on and says, we can argue about scope and timeline, but what we can't argue about is that this is a reality. There will be a major shift in workforce. Well, I have no doubt of that. I really don't. Over time, an infinite time scale, we're going to be replaced probably, but it's probably going to take longer than they think it's going to take. But, she's just trying to, I think this kind of came off a little bit negative, this headline, because it makes it like, oh God, truck drivers, you got to watch out. Your jobs are going to be gone tomorrow. But, she even says here, you got to work, you got to think about the timeline too. Some people say it's going to be quick. Some people say it's going to be a ways out. It depends on your view of the whole thing. But one thing for sure is, they're looking at it now because they know there are going to be truck drivers out of jobs eventually. Maybe it's 10 years down the road. Maybe it's 20, maybe it's 50, but they are going to have to prepare themselves to have a bunch of truckers who need jobs elsewhere. Hopefully that's not in my lifetime, and all you young puppies will have to worry about that. That'll be your problem at that point. But anyway, they are looking at it. I did see in a different article, I don't have it here, but she did say she's talking like 900,000 jobs lost. 900,000. According to the last thing I saw, there was about 3.5 million CDL holders. So that is a good chunk. That's what, a third, a little less than a third of truck drivers without jobs. I don't know. They're talking about, we can retrain them to do jobs within the industry or just retrain them to do jobs outside the industry. They're just got to figure out how to tackle all this. Man, what a mess. Again, hopefully all this will be, happening when I am dead and in the ground. Good luck, all you youngsters out there. That is, if we can get any youngsters to actually join this industry. That's seeming to be a problem nowadays, too. Again, if you want to check out what Miss Joshi says about this, head on over to transportationnation.com or click the link in the show notes. And in more government fun, let's head over to overdriveonline.com, where we're going to be discussing the nationalized ABC test. The what? No, it's not a spelling bee. This is a bill making its way through the U.S. House right now. It would be following in the footsteps of California's AB 5 law that was passed in 2019. That's the one that talks about whether leased owner operators can be classified as employees or, independent contractors. So according to this article, this is a really good read if you're interested in this kind of stuff. Check this out, link in the show notes. Basically, it says that, a lot of owner operators get their own authority and run under their own authority by first becoming, they start out maybe as a company driver, and then they graduate to be a leased owner operator because it's, easier than being, a full blown owner operator with your own authority. I mean, when you're a leased guy or gal, you're, you got your company and they're figuring all the taxes for you. They're just, they're figuring all your maintenance. They're taking money out of your maintenance for your maintenance fund automatically. They're finding loads for you, just kind of make it easier. And then once you kind of, look at those statements, kind of get a gist of what you're doing, you can then eventually move on. And that a lot of truck drivers do that. And that's how they become owner operators, full blown owner operators running on their own authority. And this bill threatens to just kill that completely and say this model is no longer doable. And as we all know, that leasing model has been going on in the trucking industry for ages. So if you're an owner operator, you might want to look into this, especially if you're a lease. If you're doing a lease right now, they do suggest that if you are a lease owner operator, that you call your representatives and your senators, tell them your story, tell them, how you got started and how important this, this lease thing is to you. Maybe it's not that, you don't know how to do the get your own authority. Maybe you just don't want to, maybe you want the freedom of being able to take the loads you want to take and not take the loads you want to take. And, sometimes those lease guys make more money than other drivers, company drivers. So there's that too. But they don't want all the hassles of doing all the taxes and figuring all the road taxes and the license and registration and all that crap. They just want it all done for them, but still being able to say, hey, I own my own company. Whatever. If you're interested in this, check this out because it's coming around the corner. Well, we don't know that it's going to pass, but they say it's largely supported by Democrats and largely not by Republicans. So we'll see. We do know the Democrats have the power right now. So we'll see what happens there. Anyway, link in the show notes, overdriveonline.com. If you're interested in learning more about this, there's a lot of detail. Like I said, this is a very good article. Check it out. All right, let's head over to thetruckersreport.com, where we're going to discuss another situation where the government has reversed a decision from before. This time it could be bad, could be good. I don't know. I'm debating with myself about this one. I would be interested to hear your comments. So listen up and get prepared to send me your thoughts. This one is called Sleeper Berth Guidance Withdrawn in Huge Win for Truck Driver Pay Reform. Again, not so sure about that. You can decide. Basically, there was a rule by the Department of Labor back in 2019 that I'm going to try to summarize this as best I could. Basically, it was saying that all time spent in the bunk is not compensatable, basically. Because they're saying, hey, it's non-working time. You're not doing anything. Therefore, the companies don't have to pay you to sleep. And that's been the standard across the industry for years. Now, people have said that many drivers have said, hey, I'm away from home. I should be getting paid. Well, okay. I don't know. I mean, salesmen for pharmaceutical companies are probably not getting paid while they're in a hotel. They're getting a salary or whatever. Maybe that's all figured in. I don't know. But, I would argue that if your pay is so low that you are dropping below the minimum wage, which is what this is saying, some drivers are actually, since they're not getting paid for their time in the bunk, that when you figure out, the hourly pay for over the course of the week or the 3 weeks or however long they're out there actually making less than minimum wage. If you're making that little, something's wrong. You need to find a new job. But I don't know. Anyway, this ruling that they did recently, they just canceled that altogether and said, hey, we're not saying that you have to pay your drivers for being in the bunk, but we're not saying that you don't have to either. You can choose what you want to do as a company on that. For instance, Walmart pays their drivers, to sleep 9 or 10 hours, I think, up to 10 hours a day. They pay them. Very few companies do that, though. And again, like I said, I'm torn on this. I mean, sure, I think it would be great if all truckers got paid for sleeping, but and they say, well, it is mandatory to do the job. You have to sleep to drive. Well, that's true, but you also have to sleep to live. So is everybody entitled to pay while they're sleeping? I don't know. I'm a little torn on this one. I don't know. The inner part of me says you shouldn't be paid while you're sleeping because, if you had a local job, you'd still be sleeping, right? You're not working all the time. So why would they pay you? But maybe I am wrong about that. You tell me all about it. Tell me I'm wrong or tell me I'm right. truckerdump@gmail.com. Send me an audio comment or an email. By the way, audio comments, I've been mentioning those a couple times. Easiest way to do that is just open up an app. You probably got one on your phone called Voice Memos or something like that. It's called Voice Memos on the iPhone. And you can just tap the little button, record what you have to say, keep it under 3 minutes if you can, and then when you're done recording, it will give you an option to share it with somebody and just send that off to truckerdump@gmail.com. Much appreciated. Looking forward to hearing from you. Anyway, there's more details about all of this stuff in this little short article, so go check it out at thetruckersreport.com or link in the show notes. All right, next up we're going to freightwaves.com, where we're going to give you a little update on the Prime Inc. Lawsuit against Amazon Prime. You remember that one? That's where Prime is saying that, Amazon Prime coming in and calling themselves Prime is, diluting our good name and everything. And, they're like the logos. If you look at it, the logos are nowhere similar. So I don't really understand this one. I don't even know how it's getting a court date, but it is. They're going to look at this. It's got a trial date for February 2022. So next year, about this time. So we'll keep an eye on this one right now. Honestly, all I have to say about this one right now is if you are driving for Amazon Prime, well, I don't know if any of you have noticed this, but I have noticed more and more that there's something about Amazon Prime drivers that like to pull over on the shoulder of the road. I don't know if they're taking their break there, if they're making a sandwich, if they're, I don't know what they're doing, taking a nap. I don't know, but there seems to be more and more of them that find the spot to stop is on the shoulder of an interstate instead of, even when there's like an exit ramp in view or something like that, they won't, park off that shoulder. They park right off the main road. I don't know what the deal is with that. It seems like, I don't know, can it be true? But that it seems to be with more Prime drivers than anybody else, or I should say Amazon Prime drivers. See, hey, maybe Prime has a point. People would get it confused. But honestly, if I was Prime Incorporated, I would be arguing right now that the Amazon Prime drivers are giving us a bad name because, they're the ones parking on the side of the road and we don't want people thinking our drivers are doing that. Either way, it's going to be an interesting little lawsuit. And, I guess we'll find out. Hopefully we won't have to hear about this again until February 2022, now that a date is set. Keep you updated. Link in the show notes on that one to freightwaves.com. All right, back over to overdriveonline.com we go. This one is called The Tens of Thousands of Drivers with Drug Violations Likely to Leave Trucking for Good. All right. This has to do with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA, their new drug and alcohol clearinghouse that we've been talking about a lot. This is a clearinghouse where, all of the trucking companies have to go and check that nowadays before they hire a driver. And, everybody had to be registered for it if you plan on getting a new job. The way I understand it, you don't have to register for it if you plan on working the same job for the rest of your life. But if you're going to be looking for a new job, you need to be a part of that, or else they won't be able to check on you and you will not get a new job. But anyway, this program took effect on January 6th of 2020. And to date, more than 56,000 violations were recorded. And here's something a little shocking. Only 1,200 of them were alcohol related. So, whoa, what else are we taking out there? But here's the scary part. Of the 52,000 drivers who got at least one violation last year, just a little bit more than 45,000 are still unable to drive. And of those, almost 35,000 have not even begun the return to work protocol that they have to go through for counseling and testing negative for drugs and alcohol. Only 6,500 violators have completed it and are cleared to drive. Wow. That's like, they're saying like over 45,000 drivers have not cleared this process, and therefore we're losing that many drivers in the industry. Now, I think that's sad for many reasons. One, because people are looking at it as like, oh, poor us, we're losing drivers. Well, that is sad, but are these the kind of drivers you want? I mean, I don't personally. If you're doing drugs, and clearly you're doing more drugs than alcohol, according to what this article says, yeah, boy, I'm not sure I want you out here on the road. I don't know. What are your thoughts? To me, it's just like, good riddance if you can't pass a drug test. And they say thousands more are going to leave because they're afraid they're going to pass a drug test. Well, if you're afraid you're going to pass a drug test, then you're probably you're on drugs, right? Let's just face that fact. So anyway, I don't know what this all means. Maybe it means that, if we lose 40,000 drivers, they want drivers even more and driver pay will go up. That'd be a nice perk of this, wouldn't it? Let's reward the people who stay sober. How about that? There's a odd thing to think about. Let's reward the good drivers. Heaven forbid. Anyway, interesting little article here, and a little scary to know how many people have not passed that test and furthermore have not even tried to get reauthorized to drive again. So drugs are more important than your livelihood? Okay. See you later. For more information on this, check out the link in the show notes. All right, just a few more here. This next one I found on pittsburgh.cbslocal.com. Yeah, this was pointed out to me by somebody. I do not remember who it was. It might have been on Facebook or in Slack. I can't remember. Anyway, sorry for not giving you the shout out you deserve, whoever turned this in. But this, honestly, this is a little confusing to me. The title of the article is Truckers Pushback Against PennDOT's Plan to Toll 9 Bridges Statewide. But then when you get down into the article, it actually talks about I-79 being tolled. So I don't know. Are there 9 bridges on I-79? I don't know. It talks about how the tolling that they're going to do would help build a bridge and expand some roadway. But I don't know where they're talking about the 9 bridges. Anyway, regardless, more tolls in Pennsylvania. Yeah, just what they need after all those big hikes over on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, right? Well, naturally, lots of people are pissed about this. They're saying cars will only pay $1 or $2, but trucks could pay as much as $10 for a single pass through. But the Pennsylvania Motor Truck Association says the industry is already shouldering too much highway funding as is. They say truckers pay about 40% of the costs and taxes in Pennsylvania, despite the fact that they only drive about 9% of the miles. Yeah, let's get the truckers that are going through there. That makes total sense. Well, it does to them. Anyway, they say this probably won't happen until 2023 at the earliest. And I think it's funny right here, this last part of the article, it says, and it'll be subject to public input in public hearings where they'll likely get an earful from truckers and private citizens alike. Yeah, I would think so. And rightly so. Anyway, check out the link in the show notes to that one. It's a long, long link. And speaking of truckers getting taxed the heck out of them, over on the Truckers Report, mileage-based fees for trucks spread to another state. We just talked about Pennsylvania and how they're trying to add tolls and stuff like that. Well, Connecticut has been trying to do this for quite a while now. First, they tried to get a tolling program that would bring in $1 billion a year. But then it says when they were talking about tolling everyone, it proved too unpopular. Who knew? So then he tried to change it to just tolling truckers only. But that had legal questions, whether they could do that, for all truckers and just single them out. So now instead of the $1 billion a year he's trying to get, the governor has lowered his funding goals to about $90 million this year. And what he wants to do is charge Class 6 through Class 13 trucks between 2 and 17.5 cents per mile for any miles that they travel in Connecticut. Now, here's the catch. It's not for everyone, because if it was for everyone, there'd probably be some legal issues in there. But they're only planning on placing this on local Connecticut trucks. So it wouldn't even count for out-of-state drivers. While that's great for most of you, it sucks for Connecticut drivers. And I hope they don't get this through. It's high time these states figure out a different way to make money than to just keep on nailing the trucker. I mean, they do want these products that we're bringing into their states, right? Well, truckers, especially these lease guys, and the owner-operator, full owner-operators can choose not to take that freight into Connecticut if they want to, and they possibly will. Either that or they're going to get paid really, really well to do it, because nobody's going to want to do it. So anyway, quit taxing us truckers. Come on. All right. Last, let's end up with a good story over at overdriveonline.com. 4 new Loves added 335 truck parking spaces. Yep, we spoke about this in the last podcast and how they were planning on adding, was it 3,000 new parking spaces, I think, in 2021? I think that sounds right. Anyway, they're opening 4 new locations in Jamestown, Wyoming, St. Charles, Minnesota, Hamilton, Alabama, and Papillion, Nebraska, if I said that right. Papillon? I don't know. I think there's a dog name that looks very similar. Anyway, like I said, it's adding 335 truck parking spaces, and that is great. The Jamestown is on I-80, offers 87 parking spaces. Carl's Jr., and a Speedco. That's pretty awesome. St. Charles, Minnesota has a Hardee's in it and 63 spots. Hamilton, Alabama's got, that's on US 22. I just passed that one the other day. It's got, 78 parking spaces, an Arby's and a Speedco. And the one in Nebraska, Papillion, whatever. They have 107. Ooh, that's a big one. Parking spaces, a Wendy's, and a Speedco. So, man, that's good to hear. I'm glad Loves is expanding the way they are. Hey, Loves, if you're interested in advertising on the show, let me know. truckerdump@gmail.com. And that, my friends, will do it for the news. What say we move on? Hey, have you gone over to volvotrucks.us to check out their new engine? What new engine, you might ask?
The D13 Turbo Compound.
Hey, if you got a fix, use them, right? Well, if you haven't, just click on the link in the show notes and it'll take you right to the video. But since we don't have video on a podcast, let me explain. No, there's too much. Let me sum up. I'd bet someone $1,000 that Volvo has never had anyone do a Princess Bride reference in one of their ads. So anyway, basically Volvo's new D13 Turbo Compound is 6% more efficient than their previous D13 and up to 11% over their 2015 engines. And you owner-operators know that really it's all about the bottom line. And saving fuel is a great way to do it. I mean, you know better than I do that at least a third of your operating expenses are fuel. So why wouldn't you want to save some when you can? So how does the D13 TC accomplish all this? Well, it's got a new wave-shaped piston design that burns fuel more efficiently. And any extra energy is then recaptured and reused by the turbo compound unit. It's a pretty cool design. Check out the link in the show notes to see how it works. Even better, the D13 TC knows when you're loaded and when you're empty. So when you're loaded, it's going to give you more torque. But when you're empty, it's going to be like a little English lady sipping on her tea. Only your D13 TC is holding its little finger aloft and sipping on fuel. And you know what's even better about the D13 turbo compound engine? It comes in multiple configurations and it's standard equipment in all of their new VNL series trucks. So not only are you getting a sexy beast, you're getting an efficient beast. So like I said, head on over to volvotrucks.us to check out the video or click on the link in the show notes and it'll take you right to it. As always, thanks to Volvo Trucks for sponsoring this episode of Trucker Dump. Okay, in typical Todd fashion, I boned this interview thing. I tried to get this out earlier, way earlier, because, tax time is here, basically, and I wanted to get it out a little ahead of time. But, I failed as usual. What's new with that, right? Well, before I introduce you to Mason, let me explain something in this interview that I realized afterwards that kind of sounded a little weird. We kind of had a little session there where I was kind of going off on 1099, and let me specify that, because I know 1099s are anybody who is an independent contractor. So, if you lease onto a company or something like that, that is considered a 1099. What I was specifically talking about in the interview that I did not make clear was that I was talking about the 1099 companies that are very shady, that, don't exactly tell you that you're going to be an independent contractor. They just kind of make it sound like you are an employee. And those are the ones I was talking about specifically. So just to make that clear. And another thing I'd like to make clear is that this is not a paid advertisement. We do talk about COS accounting and tax quite a bit during this, and I am constantly referring to, getting a tax accountant. I am not saying get them specifically. Nothing wrong with that. You're welcome to reach out to him. I hope you do. But again, I benefit nothing from this. And I know very little about this company, honestly. But I was approached by them about talking about this tax benefit for truckers. So I thought, hey, that's a good idea. Let's bring Mason on the show and talk about that. So just to be clear, this is not a paid advertisement. So now let me introduce you to Mason Warr. He is, he's been working his way up the ladder for quite a few years at multiple companies. He's a master of sales and managing people, and he was recruited to be the CEO and co-founder of COS Accounting and Tax. And since then, COS has had a growth of 1,000%. So he must be pretty good at his job, right? And he currently coaches managers, CEOs, and small business owners how to replicate those kind of numbers. And funnily enough, his employees have nicknamed him Mom. So here's the interview with Mason Warr, CEO and co-founder of COS Accounting and Tax. Okay, Mason, we got to know what's up with the nickname Mom.
That's a good question. Yeah, so my partner and I are very different, and he has a much harder hand than I do, and so I was focusing much more on kind of the personnel issues, and then he started working more on just making sure everybody's performance was up to par, and that's kind of how I got the nickname Mom. They started calling me the mom of the office.
Okay.
Because I have a little bit softer skill set, I would say.
Okay, so that would make him the dad, I guess, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's a running joke about that.
Right. I was just hoping you didn't put all your employees on mega guilt trips, as the mom.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, of course not.
All right. Well, let's just start off with, what is the tax date this year? Wasn't there some kind of extension last year on the deadline?
Yeah, so it would have been April 15th, but they actually extended it to May 17th. And so everybody for their personal taxes has an extra month and a couple days. The problem is that most people who had any sort of LLC or S corporation, their deadline was still March 15th, unless they extended. Then they would have extended up to September 15th.
Oh, okay. So is that extension still going this year?
That's every year. Every year you can extend your LLC and S corp taxes up to September 15th. So that's not any different than any other year.
Oh, okay. I was thinking there was some kind of COVID extension last year or something like that, but
There was. I think that actually did extend, but this year they did not extend the LLC S corp deadline.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about that this year.
Nope.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
The last thing we need is more, a confusion around tax time, right? So
I know there's already enough of that as it currently is. So yeah.
Yeah, it certainly is. So a couple of years ago, I know Trump changed some things, and truckers were not able to take these itemized deductions, like all this per diem stuff. Is that still in effect?
Yeah, the per diem changed a couple of years ago to where it was meals and entertainment, and it shifted to just meals. And I'm not aware of any changes there. That's what we're talking about. Because it used to be you could include things like entertainment, bowling, or going to a movie or things like that, and you can't anymore. Okay.
See, with all this confusion, with all these changes and everything, that like this last year, I was so confused, because we used to claim this, so many so many days out on the road, and we could claim up to, I don't remember, $60 or whatever it was, every day we were out on the road. And it was a real boon for truckers. Everybody loved that. Yeah. And then it got changed, and I was really worried about it. I remember, last year, I actually, because they raised that standard deduction so high, that I actually benefited by not itemizing anymore. It was just easier just to take the standard deduction.
Yeah, most of the time we still find that the per diem is still typically better than the standard deduction, because if you're out there for 100 days, and let's say it is $60 per day, then you would get half of that. So it's like, let's say it was $6,000 that you ended up qualifying for in the standard or the per diem. You get to write off half of that. So it'd be $3,000 as a tax deduction, which is still typically better than the standard deduction. That's what my business partner would say. He's the tax expert. So in almost every scenario, he's still like, the per diem is still better. So.
Okay. Well, because I thought that extension had gone up quite a bit, or not the extension, the standard deduction. I thought that had gone up a lot, like 24,000 for a couple or something. And I know I never got anywhere near that, as a trucker. Maybe it's because, I'm just a typical, company driver, and all I could really claim was those meals. I couldn't claim office expenses and all that other junk.
Right. Yeah. So usually if somebody is if they're on a sole proprietor or they have an LLC, then they typically have a lot more expenses that they can claim themselves, standard deduction. Because, if you think about how many miles they can claim, how many expenses, or they could take, gas and repairs, and typically they're going to be higher if somebody is a full-time trucker than the standard deduction, even if you're married, in almost every scenario. So.
Okay. Yeah. I think as a new owner operator, or, what we're really here to talk about is 1099 contractors, that kind of a situation, I have a feeling these truckers can get themselves in a lot of trouble if they don't know what they're doing on this.
Yeah. Either way, either because they're ignorant to what's available to them, or they try to take too much. Either way, it's, they could get themselves into trouble. One, they could get themselves into trouble if they're claiming more than what's allowable, or if they're way too aggressive. And then on the flip side, if they don't know what is available, then they could lose quite a bit of money because they didn't take advantage of every opportunity available to them. And so typically what we do is in the fall, we break it down for them. We have a tax planning meeting, and we say, okay, tell us what all of your expenses were estimated, and we can give you a good picture of what your tax outcome is going to be the following spring. And that way you could go either way. And so, if you have to do any major purchases before the end of the year to try to take those tax deductions, or if you should wait the following year to get any major purchases, or if you need to take advantage of some retirement accounts, or, some other accounts that might be tax shelters for you to keep money in your pocket.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess we ought to go back, and there are some listeners on here who have no idea what a 1099 contractor is. What can you tell us what that is?
Yeah. So most people are very aware of what W-2 is. Basically means you're a W-2, you're an employee of a business, meaning your taxes are taken out of each paycheck. But when people switch, and I did this too, I worked for corporate America, and then I switched to be a business owner, and I didn't understand that, oh, wait, I have to figure out all these taxes on my own now. So as a 1099 contractor, you are essentially an independent contractor. Some people say gig worker, some people say, a sole proprietor, whatever the situation. If you do not have taxes taken out of your paycheck and you're just paid a flat amount, then you need to figure that out later. And so that's why most 1099 contractors, LLCs, they either are part of some group or network that teaches them how to, take advantage of some deductions, or they have a really good tax accountant who can save them money. So essentially it just means that you are paid a flat amount, and then later you have to reconcile your tax situation with the IRS.
Yeah. Now, I know you said you dealt with a lot of rideshare type people, and, you have some 1099 truckers and stuff too. I've got to tell you, 1099 in the trucking industry, I don't even know if you're aware of this, it does not have a good reputation among most truckers because I don't know what it is. It just always seems like they're shady in a way. I mean, I'm not saying they all are, but
right.
That's the general consensus because, you know, they just say, hey, you're a 1099, you're your own boss, but they don't really tell you what is involved. And I've noticed a lot of like the ads that I see will say, you know, 75 cents per mile or 85 cents per mile. And it sounds real great. You know, to us company drivers, we're like, wow, that's a lot per mile. It's way more than what I'm making. But
totally.
you know, it's the fine print that you got to really look out for. So I've said numerous times on this podcast that be really careful if you're looking at a 1099 contractor. And if somebody is paying a huge amount that isn't normally paid to a truck driver, start asking some questions.
Absolutely. And I think that's true for almost every industry. You know, the contractors, they take on a lot more risk. So the upside might be significantly higher, but if you're not aware of all the risk that's involved, and this is in sales, this is as a business owner, this is in, you know, Amazon, the wholesaling type business.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It sounds really good. And then you get into it and you're like, holy cow, I have a lot of risk here and I might lose everything. Or after all the fine print and all the nickel and diming that the company that I work with takes, then it's not as good as I originally thought. So it can be really good, but again, you have to be aware of the risk for sure.
Yeah. I know some, truckers who have, you know, I've talked to some here that have written into the show and they were surprised by it, you know, and now they're trapped for a while. And it's like, okay, now you need to really get out and seek some help, you know, and that's where, you know, your company, COS accounting and tax can, you know, help with stuff like that. So, yeah. So what do you see is the advantage of a 1099 over just being a company driver? Cause you know, company drivers get paid pretty good these days. You know, they're getting a lot of, you know, we've had a lot of pay raises in the last few years, not just my company, but, you know, lots of companies across the board because there's a driver shortage. That's a different argument. We won't get into the whole driver shortage argument, but, you know, what would be the benefit? Why would somebody consider being a 1099 contractor instead of just being a company driver?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think, for a lot of people, again, it goes back to risk versus reward. And in every industry, there's going to be some sort of risk involved. If it's W-2, essentially what the risk is that you might not be getting every opportunity that exists out there. You're basically, your time is owned by somebody else and they pay you according to time. As a 1099, you control your own destiny, essentially. You get paid for how hard you work or how long you work or how much effort or time or risk that you put into it. You know, and I think that's where it can be significantly more beneficial for a 1099 contractor who wants to grow, because now, okay, well, I'm finding success doing it by myself, but what if I was able to get another truck and hire another driver? And then what if I was able to get another truck and then hire another driver? And all of a sudden your volume starts making up for the risk, because you're hiring out other people that could be helping grow a business that you are building. And so that means the reward might be significantly higher. However, you know, there's a lot of risk to that. If there is a downturn in the economy, it might affect your team or your company. And so the risk is significantly greater. So I guess I would go back to risk versus reward. How risky are you willing to be? Because there are times where, you know, the people who have taken the most risk end up with a lot more money in their pocket.
Yeah. You know, I never really looked at that angle. Like you were talking about how, you know, as a company driver, you just can't benefit from certain things that are your time. And like a perfect example of that is being stuck at a shipper or receiver for 3 or 4 hours. You know, as a company driver, a lot of times companies just don't pay that, and you're just sitting there and you're not getting compensated for that whatsoever. But if you're a 1099 or you're a full owner operator, something like that, you can claim that time as downtime. And I'm guessing that would be deductible, things like that.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, like you're able to write off significantly more. And then sometimes your tax outcome might be significantly greater than W-2 because again, W-2, they determine what is taken out of your taxes. But as an owner of your business, as a 1099, you control what you pay yourself or what you don't pay yourself or what the equipment that you need. And all of that, if you're going to use it anyway, like it's some sort of GPS system or something that you need in your truck, you buying that as a 1099 contractor is a tax deduction, whereas W-2 it's not, right? And now you would think that the company would provide it, but typically companies don't provide every necessity that you have. And so that can be can be a little frustrating. So,
typically is the correct word there. Most of them do
There's
not.
Some companies better than others, and that's that's in every industry. And so you kind of have to evaluate which is the best company for me, or is it best that I'm on my own?
Yeah. Well, I've talked a lot about being a union. I'm union driver now, have been for the past couple of years, and we get paid for a lot of things that others don't because the union fought hard and long for it. They don't think we should be able to sit around at, waiting on a load and not get paid for it. They're saying, okay, from the time you punch in at the beginning of your day to the time you clock out, you're getting paid for something, even if you're just sitting there waiting, but again, a lot of non-union jobs don't have that benefit. So,
I think that's an interesting point. The other thing is that when you're 1099, you're typically not being paid to sit around. So if you're very assertive and forward moving and you're always wanting to be growing, then it could be really good opportunity for you. But if that is too much for you and you'd rather be paid for just the time that you're driving, then I guess you just have to look at your situation, figure out what's best for you as an employee or a business owner.
Well, as you said, there's no way you're ever, if your thoughts are in the clouds and you're planning on growing and you want to expand and be more than just a truck driver, there's no other option. You got to go 1099 or you got to go full owner operator or something because, you can only drive one truck at a time.
Absolutely. Exactly.
Unless you got some weird superpower I'm not aware of where you can split yourself.
Absolutely.
That would be awesome though, wouldn't it? To have that superpower. Yeah. That would be awesome. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, this is just another prime example of why if you're into 1099, if you're even an owner operator, especially a new one, and you don't know what you're doing, you really need to seek tax services, accounting services, so they can help you through this thing. Absolutely. I don't think the average person that first got into 1099 would have any idea they could deduct stuff like detention time. It just wouldn't cross their mind because they're used to working as a company driver, so this is why this is, I'm guessing this is the kind of services that COS accounting and tax can do for you.
Yeah. Let me ask you, Todd, if you were to compare what the average W-2 driver makes versus the average 1099 driver, what would you say the difference is there? Or if you were just to throw out a number for W-2 and then throw out a number for 1099 driver? Well,
I know the numbers from the U.S. Department of Labor. They actually say that the average truck driver makes $38,000 a year. But now we have to remember that includes all truck drivers. So that includes the guys who are making the good money on the road. And that also includes the guys who are running the local jobs getting paid $10 an hour. So typically, I think what a new truck driver coming in and driving over the road, usually they're making right around the $40,000, $45,000, maybe $50,000 their first year. And that's gross. I have no idea about a 1099. I would guess maybe, considering how much higher the pay is usually, maybe like, 10, 15 cents more. I don't know. I guess maybe 75, 80.
Okay. So let's just throw out some numbers there. Okay. So we can kind of compare and see if in all reality, a 1099 versus a W-2 would be better. So as a W-2, typically your payroll tax just alone, let's say you made $50,000 as W-2, you're going to pay 7.65% in tax. So that means you're paying almost $4,000 just in payroll tax. That's just taken out of your paycheck. That's for Social Security and Medicare. Okay. So you're looking at about 46,000 that you're making after tax. Okay.
Okay.
Now, when we look at 1099 and you say, okay, well, 80,000. Now, the difference is you're going to be paying for a lot more here. But our strategy is that instead of just doing a 1099 and being a sole proprietor, we say you set yourself up as a corporation. It's called an S corporation. And this is one of our biggest strategies and one of our most helpful for drivers in particular, or just 1099 in general. So what they do is they set up an LLC and they tax it as an S corporation. And what that means is that your business, so like, let's say you truck drive for a company and you're contracting for them. That company pays your truck driving business. Let's call it truck driving ABC LLC or something, right?
Okay.
So ABC, they get paid by the corporation that is hiring you out to drive, and you get paid $80,000 a year. Now, typically, you would have to pay 15.3% on the entire $80,000 minus your deductions, which would be a lot, right? So let's say we even took out $40,000, and $40,000 was in expenses, and so the remaining amount is $40,000. So you would say, well, I have to pay myself $40,000, and then I pay 15.3% on that. So that means my taxes is about $6,000. So if I didn't set up an S corporation, I would end up paying $6,000 in tax on that $40,000 after the $40,000 in deductions.
Wow,
so that means they would only make like $34,000. So it's worse than being a W-2. Now, what we do is we say, nope, don't do it that way. Set yourself up as an employee of your business, and from that total $80,000, pay yourself a wage. And so let's say it's 20%. So you're paying yourself $16,000. Now that 15.3% that you had to pay on $40,000, you only pay on $16,000. And so you're saying, okay, $16,000 times 0.153. Now your tax situation is $2,448 rather than what you would have paid on $40,000, which would have been $6,000. Does that make sense? So now the amount in payroll tax that you pay is only about $2,500, which is a much better tax situation because we restructured your business as not just an LLC, but we tax it as a corporation, meaning you have one employee, and that's you. You're the employee of your business. So you pay yourself a wage of $20,000 a year.
Okay, so you're paying yourself a wage of $20,000 a year.
Sorry, $16,000.
Okay, 16. Right, yeah, 16,000. Okay, now I know every trucker right now is out there thinking, how can I live on $16,000? So what's the answer to that?
Let's break it down again. Okay, so you still have that $80,000. Now, from the $80,000, you paid yourself a guaranteed wage of $16,000. So you're saying, okay, that's the first cut. Now, you still had the $40,000 in expenses. So now we're at 80,000 minus 16,000. That's 64,000. Now, you still had 40,000 that you had taken out for deductions. So you have a remaining 24,000. That would be
maybe you just sunk that back in the business.
Yep. The 24,000 goes back to you, and there's no payroll tax on it. So you say 24,000 that you get back plus the 16,000 that you guaranteed yourself. So now you're back to 40,000. But on that 40,000, you only paid $2,500 in payroll tax rather than 6,000. It came out to the same outcome. The outcome was still 40,000, but now you're only paying 2,500 instead of 6,000. Does that make sense? So
yes. Yeah, it does.
Setting yourself up as an S corp, it saves these truck drivers $3,500 in that scenario, just on payroll tax, not even including state and federal tax. So that's where we're like, okay, it's not even close to comparable.
See, again, this is why this crap is so confusing. This is why tax and accounting people exist. It really is. You know, truckers, they drive trucks, you know. Let a professional handle this.
Absolutely. And to be honest, and I'll be honest with everybody, I do not have an accounting background. I did not come from accounting. I got my 4-year degree in communication. That's it. My partner, he's a master's in taxation. He's the numbers guy. All I understood about this is that an S corporation is significantly better for 1099 contractors than an LLC if you profit more than $4,500 compared to our charges. So almost everybody who profits $4,500 or more will come out with a much better situation tax-wise if they do an S corporation than if they do just a base LLC or they don't set up an LLC at all. So our thing is we want to make sure you don't have to know everything. That's our job. Our job is to study this stuff and give you the best possible tax outcome. If it doesn't make sense for your financial situation to set up an S corporation, we won't suggest it. We'll say, we'll just do a Schedule C. We'll do a 1099. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff, or just go through TurboTax. It doesn't in that scenario, but in almost every scenario, TurboTax, H&R Block, some of these big companies, they are not specialists in small business or 1099s. That's just what we do. That's 95% of our client base are 1099 contractors. So we're really good, and we're really passionate about getting these small business owners the best possible tax outcome, because we want to keep their money in their pocket, and we want to keep them as clients for years and years to come. So that's our goal.
Yeah. Well, I confess to using TurboTax, and I have for quite a few years because, I am a company driver, and it's just not very complicated, especially since they hardly let you take any deductions anymore, and I do have this side small business, but I'll be honest with you, it doesn't make much money. It barely puts a dent, in anything.
Yeah, totally. But it's your side hustle. It's fun.
Yeah. And I'm looking at, $170 a year to file my taxes with all the business stuff on the side and everything. Yep. That's nothing, but totally. I don't need anything very complicated.
For sure. And a couple thoughts on that. So for these 1099 contractors, accounting services, it's a tax deduction for you because it's your business. So you're getting a tax deduction for having an accountant. The other thing I would say is that no matter how much you're making, let's say a guy's making 200, 500,000 even as a 1099 or as a business owner in the trucking space, we can help them get tax returns. I've had multiple people as clients where they make 200,000 or more and they are paying nothing in federal and state taxes. And the reason we can do that is because we know so many tax deductions and tax shelters that exist out there that most people just are not aware of. And so we recommend highly that people take advantage of whether it be retirement accounts or, extra deductions, property. And we try to counsel and guide and give strategies on ways for them to keep money in their pocket and build assets along the way, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all for.
Yeah. Okay. Say somebody has been doing 1099 or even owner operating for the past few years. They've just been using TurboTax, going through the motions, and now they're thinking, oh crap, I've just lost a lot of money. Is there anything they can do about that? Can they go back and amend returns and stuff?
We can. Yeah. So that's the thing that my business partner has gotten very good at. So there have been a couple times where we have people who are like, oh my gosh, the last 3 years I made, $80,000 and I just went through TurboTax. And I just did it as, just 1099 income. And we're like, oh boy. So we go through it.
Oh boy.
Now there's one lady, she owns a salon, and we got her back $9,000 that she overpaid in taxes. And this kind of thing happens all the time. So we can go back about 2-3 years on their 1099. We can backdate an S corp or an LLC. And then we can. So absolutely, we can go backwards. It is expensive for us to do that, and there's not many firms who will do that. But we know the IRS revenue code. If the IRS ever comes back and says no, this is not allowable, we send them the code and we say this is where it says in the legal code that we're allowed to do this, and then we move forward. And we've never gotten called back on that if it ever comes back. So, So in terms of that, all the time we deal with people who, for the last couple of years have been on 1099 and paid tens of thousands more than they needed to. And we've gotten a lot of that back. Yeah.
So. Yeah. That's got to be an extra joy in that, just rubbing it in the IRS's face, doesn't it?
Yeah, but you kind of put a target on your back, right? You're
right.
Yeah. We want to be, aggressive enough, but not to the point where we're breaking any laws. Obviously, we don't want to get anybody in trouble. We don't want to get ourselves in trouble. And so we use the IRS's code to follow their own guidelines. And I'll tell you, their own guidelines contradict themselves all the time. And that's where it's really complicated. And that's why you need an accountant if you're a business owner or 1099.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about how much money some of these businesses can save. You mentioned we were talking about a new stimulus tax credit. What's that all about?
Yeah. So that is one of my favorite things to talk about right now because it is pretty cool. So, okay. So I'm going to paint a picture and just bear with me. Okay.
All right.
So
paint away.
Say last year, a 1099, let's say they made $40,000. Okay. And so out of that 40,000, we did it correctly. We set them up on an S corporation. And from that 40,000 that the business paid their business, they paid themselves as an employee of their business $10,000 or more in 2020. It's a pandemic year. There's lots of struggle. All sorts of companies are, going under, and truck drivers, just like everybody else, are struggling. Right. Well, if you were either had decrease in revenues of, I think it was 50% or 25% in any of those quarters compared to 2019, or you were not able to work because of government, either full or partial closures, then you can apply for a tax credit. Now, tax credit is called the ERC, the Employee Retention Credit. And so you can apply for this tax credit. And essentially what it is it's kind of like a grant. It's the best of the best because you don't have to track it and you don't have to pay it back. Now, most people are aware of a program called the PPP. And there was another one called the EIDL. A lot of business owners, a lot of companies could apply for this. Most 1099s didn't realize that they could. And so many didn't take advantage of it. Well, now there's this tax credit that goes back to, April of last year, where if you paid yourself as an employee of your business $10,000 or more, you could get a tax credit up to $5,000. Okay. So somebody like me, I drive, and make $40,000 last year. I could get a tax credit because I was shut down in the month of May and wasn't able to work, or, multiple times throughout the year for weeks at a time. Or maybe I did get COVID, or maybe there was, whatever happened, or my revenue was significantly less than the prior year. Then I can get a tax credit for $5,000 minus the payroll tax. The payroll tax is 15%. So 15% of $10,000, which is the maximum, would be $3,500 or $1,500. So I can get a check from the government for $3,500 for me as an employee of my business to put into my business. I don't have to track it. I don't have to pay it back. And this is why so many people are so excited about this program, because you had this massive opportunity cost. You weren't able to earn as much last year. And so the IRS is saying, this is a stimulus for your business. It puts money in your pocket and allows your business to continue, much like the stimulus that we got last year, or this year that we just got, the $1,400 per person, or the $600 per person. It's very much like that. It puts money in your pocket to keep your business going. And so we've helped thousands of independent contractors at this point get the ERC, this tax credit. So
yeah, wow, nice. Well, and again, I'll say it for the 15th time in this short little interview. This is why you need a professional on your side, whether it be you guys or somebody local, whatever. Somebody get some freaking help. You're losing a lot of money out there.
I agree. And there are some accountants, I will say this, there are some accountants that are better than others. Some understand and research things to try to give their clients the best possible outcome. Others, it's all about the accountant, whatever's easiest for them. And so there are sometimes where we're like advising someone that they should set up an S corporation, and their previous accountant is saying, no, don't do that until you make $100,000. Well, the problem with that is that in some cases, you're not able to write off that much. And so you still have to pay significantly more in tax. And so we say, just to mitigate taxes and lower that amount as much as possible, do this because it'll help you. Now, people who are not structured as an S corporation don't get this tax credit, this employee retention credit. And so that's one of the first things that we do is we say, hey, we want to make sure you get the best possible outcome for 2020. And now in 2021, the ERC is continuing, but instead of it being $5,000 per year, that's the maximum you can get, it's $7,000 per quarter for Q1 and Q2. And so if somebody's affected right now in New York or in LA or wherever they are, and they're not able to work or they've had a decrease in revenues, now instead of it being $5,000, it's $7,000 they could get as a maximum, and minus the payroll tax, which is going to be probably around $5,000 that they'll get in a check as a credit for their business as a stimulus.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And so again, we've had so many accountants that tell their clients, just use them for the tax credit because we've done all the research. We've done all the due diligence. We have a whole team that helps these restaurants and small businesses and 1099s be able to do this. So it's pretty fun being able to do that for people.
Wow. Okay, cool. Well, this, we've talked about the accounting and the taxes and all that stuff that COS offers. But you mentioned something a while back earlier that I don't think a lot of people think about, and that's you can actually help set up a business also.
Totally. Yeah. So this is one of our biggest revenue sources of the year because most people don't know how to set up an LLC. And even when you go on and you're trying to set it up yourself from the state website, it is pretty complicated. And some people go to, you could go to Rocket Lawyer and some of these other places. However, what happens is people then get stuck if they want to tax their LLC as an S corporation, because then they don't know how to do that. So we just, and we've had so many cases where people are like, yep, I already set up my LLC. And then we check it out and they did it wrong. And now we have to set up another one. So they paid to have it. They paid already for one, but they did it wrong. And now we have to do it because we have to do it the right way. Otherwise, tax it as an S corporation, or they put the wrong, name or dates, or, the information doesn't match up with the IRS. So let us help you out.
Yeah, I'm not the smartest cookie, but I remember going to one of those websites thinking maybe I should start an LLC for my side business, and then I looked at it and I was like, you know what? Even if I could do this, I don't know what to do once I have the thing incorporated, I mean,
now what do I do?
What do I do from there? Yeah. Let the pros do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the other thing is you wouldn't go to in the trucking world, you don't go to someone who, yourself, if you don't have any any mechanical background to do any, mechanics on your truck, you would typically go to a professional if you want it done right. I mean, I could try to get in there and do it, but I'm not going to be as effective as somebody who has the know-how, all the skills and all the tools. Now,
dear Lord, you're speaking my language right now because I am not a mechanic.
You absolutely can try, right? Yeah. And the same thing applies in the accounting world. Absolutely, you can try, but you might not always be effective, or you might make matters worse than if you do it, or if you have a professional do it. So
you're typically, if you're trying to do something you don't know how to do, you're typically going to cost you more money than it would be just paying for the first. My wife. I call her the evil overlord. She knows that name, by the way. But nice. It's like she just, when there'll be something simple to do around the house, and she'll be like, "Let's just hire a professional to do it. You're gonna screw it up." And I'm like, "Yeah, I probably will." So,
oh my gosh, yeah, no, I will tell you, my wife and I have a similar relationship. I am not very detailed, and so sometimes when I decide I'm going to do a project, it turns into a disaster. I have to do it 3 times. And there's all holes all over the wall or something that I messed up on. And I'm like, yep, did it. And she's like, oh my gosh, it looks so terrible. Now I have to call somebody to come in and fix up. I'm
Word. I hear you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if somebody wants to contact you to find out about the services you offer and things like that, what's your contact info? How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah. I mean, they can go to the website, cosaccounting.com, cosaccounting.com. They could go there. You could send an email to info@cosaccounting.com, or I can give you guys a number. I'll go kind of slowly because I don't know if people have something ready, but Our phone number is 801-960-1700. 801-960-1700. That's our office number. We're open. We're in Utah, so we're Mountain Standard Time. And feel free to give us a call. We do a free initial consultation if somebody wants to ask about S corporations. There's actually on the website they can schedule a free call. But if we move forward, then we start charging for a business setup or S corp or backdating taxes or those sort of things. So we'd love to help out in any way we can. We'd love to put money in people's pockets with that ERC, help them with a PPP, or if you're just trying to compare and see if W-2 versus if 1099 might be the best situation for you, let's absolutely look at it and see if W-2 or 1099 is better. We'd love to help anybody really who needs help. So, and if not, again, take our information, the S corporation, go ask your accountant, actually run numbers with them and see if it is better. And go from there.
Yeah. And sometimes it's one of those things where you don't necessarily take one person's opinion. Because like you said, there are bad ones out there and they might give you some bad advice. So there's nothing wrong with checking with the couple,
Absolutely.
I will, of course, listeners know all of these links to your, all this information you just gave me will be in the show notes. So they'll just be able to click a link and go right to you.
Thank you, Todd.
Okay. Well, I just have one last question for you.
Okay.
As an accounting firm, would you prefer to get electronic documents or a giant shoebox full of paper?
I don't think that's really, we hate paper over here. We love digital documents. So,
Well, I just wondered about that, because I was like, I know a lot of truckers probably just throw all their receipts in a giant shoebox and they plop it down on their counter.
And I'll say there are applications out there for your receipts. And so there are ways that you can just take a picture of it, put it in your, connect it to your QuickBooks Self-Employed or your mint.com account or whatever you need to. So take advantage of those so you don't have to carry paper.
Yeah, I know. I have to say, man, I do a podcast, so I can tell you truckers, a lot of them are technologically challenged. They're like, I can take a photo and it does what with it on my phone?
Yeah. That's awesome.
I got a flip
the
phone.
Accent. That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, Mason, I want to thank you for coming on the show and giving the listeners some good information at tax time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I had a good time doing it. Mason and I had a good time both on and off mic. Really great guy. You can see he's very passionate about his work, very knowledgeable. Again, if you want to reach out to COS Accounting and Tax, there will be links in the show notes. I hope you got some good information from this podcast. And I'm sure if you have any questions, Mason or his, the dad of the group over there, his co-founder, would be happy to answer some questions for you. So give him a shout if you need some help with your taxes. And remember, you can always go back and file if you've screwed things up in the past few years. All right. Well, thank you to Mason for coming on the show. Really appreciate his time. And, I have an apology to make here. Not to Mason, but to you, the listener. Here is the thing I hate. The trucking industry is so full of men that I often find myself falling back into the habit of saying guys when I mean drivers. I know there are a lot of ladies out there, and I hate to leave you out of the conversation. I mean, I know you're included in the word guys, but I like to I'm not one of these political correct weirdos that thinks I have to use, correct everything terminology, and never say he or she. I'm not that person. But, I do like to try to not say he or guy when I'm talking about truckers, because I know there are lots of ladies out there and I want to make sure you feel included and welcome on the Trucker Dump podcast. So again, I apologize. I realize in this episode, I said guys and quite a bit. And like I said, it's just an old habit that is hard to break because there are so many guy truckers in this industry. I got to tell you how many times I had to go back and edit my 2 books because I would just, just riding along, I'd just say he all the time. It was always he. I even put in a disclaimer at the beginning of, trucking life as to, sorry if I screw this up, because I thought I caught most of them, but I wasn't sure, so I wanted to make sure. Anyway, mentioning the books, I guess I probably ought to tell you again that those ebooks are on sale, 25% off. I guess, is it really a sale when they're pretty much always 25% off? Well, let's just put it this way. If you go to Amazon and you buy both books, you're going to have to pay full price for both of them. The only place you can get the 25% off, which is a total of $14.98 for both books, is at the website abouttruckdriving.com. And it's actually abouttruckdriving.com/combo if you want to go directly to it. And of course, there's a link in the show notes. Like, duh. So with that, thank you to Mason and that apology to all you lovely ladies who listen to the podcast. Let's move on to the feedback segment.
Hey, yo, bud, where do you want this load of feedback?
Here's a little ditty for Kevin's wife. Feedback. Inside joke there. Sorry, folks. Anywho. All right. Feedback. We've got Danny Wellman. Danny wrote me this, and I told him I would read it on episode 152, and I promptly forgot. So, getting into 153 here. Danny writes, I just found this great podcast and am listening from number 1. Wow. I am not an over-the-road driver. However, I am a B driver with tank and hazmat. I work for an environmental spill response company and have been in the hazmat field for 20-some years. I haul waste long distance as I have a run from Albany, New York to Detroit, Michigan in a 10-wheel roll-off. So in a small way, I'm a mini over-the-road guy. You have made me laugh as I've had some of the same experiences. Keep it up. I am now a dedicated listener. Dan. Well, that's awesome, Danny. I am glad to have you as a new listener, and I hope you get after going through all of those episodes, I hope you get some decent information out of it. Please write in with any questions, concerns, comments, suggestions, whatever. Always glad to hear from new listeners. Next, we're going to hear from Taran. I hope I'm saying that right. Taran Salyers. He writes, Hey, Todd, I have listened to your podcast for over a year, and now I'm interested in joining the Discord group. Well, okay. I had to write Taran back and say, I don't have a Discord group, but I'm guessing he meant he or she, I should say. I don't know if it's a male or female with that name. I'll assume a male with being a trucker, 4-year trucker, it says. Yeah, I assume they meant the Trucker Dump Slack group. And I did send off an invitation to you, Taran, and well, I don't think you've joined the group yet. So if you did not get it and you're listening to this, please send me another email and ask again. If I messed it up, I do apologize. Usually pretty good at getting these things out as soon as you request it. Anyway, for those of you who do not know what the heck we're talking about right now, the Trucker Dump Slack group is a group of truckers, mostly who listen to this podcast. And, they love getting on there and having chats back and forth. Slack is basically a glorified chat app. It's very good for sharing links back and forth, sharing conversations. Got different threads if you want to take somebody off on a little tangent by yourself. It's a really neat app. It's free to use. Just have to download the Slack app and send me a request for an invitation, and we'll get that out to you. Also, something I haven't mentioned in a long time is that if you are a Mac or an Apple lover, we have another one called iTruckers. And boy, I can't remember the email address for that one. I'll have to look. That's been a long time since I've even seen that. There's actually not been a lot going on in that group for quite some time. But hey, if you're interested in joining and livening that group up, you're welcome to. You can send an invite request to theiTruckers@gmail.com. Next, we're going to hear from Sean Coit. He writes, Hey, I'm Sean. You can call me the Chat Assassin. All right. I've been driving mostly local jobs for about 6 years and just got my first actual over-the-road job. I've been learning a lot from the podcast and I'd like to join the Slack group. I don't know how Slack works, but I'll figure it out. LOL. Thanks, Todd. Yeah, well, I sent one out to Sean, and the chat assassin has been very active in there, so we love that. Thanks for joining, Sean. And thanks for writing in. And, of course, we got to get our Stevie fix, right? Let's hear a few from her. All right, let's start out with, okay, here we go. She listened to Trucker Dump 67, which was called The Road to Smutville. This was the one where I talk about how prevalent pornography and smut is out on the road for truck drivers if you're interested in that kind of thing, and the pitfalls that can, come from getting into that world. She writes, "Hey, Todd, well, it looks like I'm going to be the lone wolf on this one. I disagree with you on this one. Living on a Carnival Midway for 15 and a half years and growing up in the entertainment industry my whole life, everything was and is about sex. I guess I've just become accustomed to it as part of my life, so to which I don't have a problem with it. So to the women and men in the adult entertainment industry, some of them are making a living just like you and I. Some of them even have kids and families at home. Do I have a problem with my man keeping porn magazines and videos in his truck? No, I don't. Now, if he's out chasing lot lizards, now we're going to have a problem. Do I think you're being holier than thou? Which I said I wasn't in the article. She says, yes, a little bit. But as you say, it's your blog and podcast and your opinion. Am I going to stop listening? No way. I love this podcast. And she says, oh, and tell the evil overlord she's a lucky lady to have such a great guy. Keep it up. Ah, well, I am a great guy. And I will tell her that. Anyway, that what you said in here, Stevie, is interesting because like you were saying how, you don't have a problem with your man keeping porno mags and videos in his truck. But you wouldn't be okay with it if he's out chasing lot lizards. That's kind of my whole point about porn. If you're looking at it all the time and you're tempted, but you've got no outlet, for instance, your wife or your significant other is not there, then that might lead you to more temptation, meaning a lot lizard now and then or something like that. So I just, we're going to have to agree to disagree on this one, that I do think that it can lead you down bad paths, as I wrote in the article. But, she was not alone in this one. This one was picked up by another website. It was a fairly liberal website. I think it was called the Good Men Project or something like that. And I wrote for them for just a little bit. They copy pasted some of my articles over there. Of course, my controversial ones, they didn't want my trucker ones, but they wanted, the Road to Smutville and the Spitting Christian Zealot and those types over there. Anyway, I got crucified by those really liberal people over there. But anyway, like you said, it's my opinion. If you don't have to read it, if you don't like it. So there's that. Next up, she listened to Trucker Dump 72, Big Rig MacGyvering. This was all about the way we truckers rig our trucks, getting rid of squeaks and whatever we have to do. She says, hey now, I like MacGyver. He's cool. Well, I agree. He is cool. That's why I called it Big Rig MacGyvering. And she says, and my favorite MacGyvering stuff, duct tape and bungee cords, which I might point out, Stevie, is something every trucker has in their truck. That's why we're all MacGyvers. And lastly, she finishes up by listening to Trucker Dump 73, which was called Oh Boy, Another Birthday, Yay. Yeah, I was pretty excited on this one. I remember I was pretty distraught that I crossed another birthday and I was still out there on the road. At the time, I was really trying to get out of trucking, and I was in a bad place when I wrote some of these articles. And she writes to cheer me up a little bit. Hey, Todd, happy birthday belated. Sorry, buddy. You ever make it a trip out to Phoenix? The beer's on me. Sorry to hear about college being delayed. There's always online classes, right? It's how I got through a lot of the 2 years I went to college. I'll just address that real quick, Stevie. I tried taking some online classes in the truck, and I just do not learn well that way at all. Quite honestly, I took a trigonometry class, and it was taking me forever in the evenings to get through that, to learn it out of a book and everything. I'm so much of an audio listener. You know, I hear, I watch, I see, I can learn. And, you know, if I can have a conversation with the teacher, get what's going on, I'm fine. But if I'm reading out of a book, I'm horrible at that, which probably explains why it takes me so long to prepare for this podcast with all the research I do in the news. But yeah, it was a real struggle. And the only reason I was actually able to pull it off is because this was right around the 2008 crash and freight was not moving at all. As soon as it picked up, I fell behind and I could not keep up, and I had to drop out of that trigonometry class just, you know, a few weeks before it was over. At the time I was averaging an A-. I was doing okay, but it was taking all my time and I was getting no sleep. So, hey, if you could pull off college courses in a truck, maybe it's easier nowadays with all the video classes and stuff like that, but I don't know. I mean, it would be one way to not waste your years out here on the road, you know, spend some time getting some college courses out of the way while you're out here. Anyway, glad it worked for you, Stevie. She goes on and says, I know you're looking forward to getting off the road soon and spending nights at home with the wife. But if you go off the road and stop driving, there'll be no more blog or podcast to entertain the masses with. Just a thought. Safe travels to you, my friend. Yeah, Stevie. Well, you know, at that time, I would have given up the podcast, you know, if I had gotten completely off the road and switched careers, because, you know, like you say, if you're not out here living the life, it's really hard to write about this stuff and really hard to come up with new ideas. And so, well, here I sit many, many years later, you know, I don't even remember when this article, that was done in 2011. So here we are, you know, 10 years later, and I'm still out here. Actually, I'm pretty happy with this new job. I'm pretty settled into the life that I am a trucker. I'm happy with the pay and you know, what the future holds for it. So I've pretty much given up on getting out of the trucking industry. Now, if somebody wants to pay me $1 million to podcast, hey, I'm all in. All right. Well, thank you to Danny, Tehran, whatever. Sorry about that. Sean, and, of course, Stevie. As always, I appreciate getting listener feedback. I have very little of it anymore. Pretty much all I have left is some more stuff from Stevie. So if you'd like to get your voice heard on the podcast, please send me an email, truckerdump@gmail.com. Even better, do an audio comment. That'd be great. Just whip out your phone, talk into it for a few minutes, and whip that off to truckerdump@gmail.com. So I guess that will about wrap up another really, really late podcast. It is what it is. I have given up all thoughts of trying to issue this podcast out on a steady timeline and a steady schedule. It ain't happening. Get used to it. I appreciate you all for sticking around for it. And you know who else's patience I appreciate? Volvo Trucks. Thanks for sponsoring this episode of Trucker Dump. All right, now let's get out of here. So, have you filed your taxes yet? How do you file? Do you use an accountant or spitball it yourself? Shoot me an email at truckerdump@gmail.com and let me know. I'm always open to constructive criticism, suggestions, and corrections too. Everything I do can be found at abouttruckdriving.com. If you haven't checked it out in a while, please do. And if you haven't told at least one of your friends about the podcast, let me encourage you to do that now. And by encourage, I mean beg. As always, I appreciate you listening to every episode. I am truly humbled by the fact that you do despite the weird schedule. So again, thank you. So until next time, drive safe and stay out of my way. That's a good way to start a podcast. Always. So anyway, for those of you new to the show, what the heck was that? And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much fun as I had. What does that even make sense? Ugh.